Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Food for the Faithful with your host, Bill Reimer. You know, most of my podcasts and blogs are inspired by my wife, which isn't surprising, given the fact that she's an extremely intelligent and both intellectually and emotionally intelligent woman, and cares deeply about the undermining of civil society and how that relates to a loss of Christian values and ethics. So we were discussing this morning the political party to which she belongs in Norway, which is conservative, and its leader Erik Selle, and an article that he had written. One of the things that I've noted when we're discussing where radical socialist ideology is taking us with its transhumanistic view of the world, with its belief that life is a zero-sum game, that the planet is in desperate straits because of humanity, because they view humanity as a blight on the planet. These people are Malthusians. I'm talking about the people in power, the sort of people that are in Davos, that were in Davos, and the sort of people that are leading both Norway and Canada right now. So one of the problems that we have, a very great problem, is that we fail to use first principles reasoning when debating with them, which is one of the very, very sad results of a loss, well, the fact that debate isn't being taught in schools any longer. The people literally don't know how to debate. There's a reason for that, because the state is engaging in policies that are purely emotional. They don't look at the outcome. The outcome means nothing to them. The only thing that they care about is appealing to emotions. And of course, the panic, the fright around COVID, and now around net zero carbon and all the ridiculous policies that governments all throughout the West are engaging in. This latest attempt to take away gas stoves is proof that they view humanity as a blight on the planet. So for us to counter this, playing whack-a-mole with every single thing that they do is counterproductive, because the radical socialists behind this, the radical socialist engineers behind this, will create a myriad of new and distracting policies aimed at hurting mankind. That's why they insist on things like MAID now, assisted suicide. Abortion is absolutely critical. But to attack each one of these things is to fail to do one principal element that's lacking, to understand where they're coming from and why. To do that, we have to reason using first principles reasoning. So I've taken an excerpt from an article, a very fine article, the link to which I'm posting in this vodcast and blog. I encourage you to read it for yourself, but I'll read an excerpt from it. First principles, the building blocks of true knowledge. First principles thinking is one of the best ways to reverse engineer complicated problems and unleash creative possibility. Sometimes called reasoning from first principles, the idea is to break down complicated problems into basic elements and then reassemble them from the ground up. It's one of the best ways to learn to think for yourself, unlock your creative potential, and move from linear to non-linear results. This approach was used by philosopher Aristotle and is used now by Elon Musk and Charlie Munger. It allows them to cut through the fog of shoddy reasoning and inadequate analogies to see opportunities that others miss. I don't know what's the matter with people. They don't learn by understanding. They learn by some other way, by rote or something. Their knowledge is so fragile. That's a quote from Dr. Richard Feynman, famed theoretical physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project. The basics of first principle reasoning. A first principle is a foundational proposition or assumption that stands alone. We cannot deduce first principles from any other proposition or assumption. Aristotle, writing on first principles, said, "In every systematic inquiry, or methodos, where there are first principles or causes or elements, knowledge and science result from acquiring knowledge of these. For we think we know something just in case we acquire knowledge of the primary causes, the primary first principles, all the way to the elements." Later he connected the idea to knowledge, defining first principles as the first basis from which a thing is known. The search for first principles is not unique to philosophy. All great thinkers do it. So why is it that governments all throughout the Western world now aren't using first principles in their reasoning? Because they've moved from thinking on the basis of outcome to the basis of thinking what will suit their attempt to re-engineer humanity. Remember, we've often spoken about the fact that these people view humanity as infinitely malleable, that they can socially engineer us into any dystopian shape that they desire. That is the foundation of what they believe. That we are tabula rasa, that we're just a blank slate, and that we don't come pre-programmed. Of course, if that were the case, we wouldn't learn to speak or wouldn't learn to walk, or wouldn't identify with our own families as we develop emotions and cognitive abilities at specific ages as we develop. So what they actually think is a denial of observable fact. I was thinking today about just after the time of the Wesleys and George Whitefield, Norway was often at the tail end of things because it's so remote and far north above Europe. But there was a fellow whose name is Hans Nielsen Hauge from the little town where my wife was born, Frederiksdal. And he had a revelation of Christ and became burdened for Norway. This was in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And he began to preach the gospel. He was not a Lutheran minister, which was the official religion of Norway at that time. But he went about preaching the gospel throughout Norway, and the state hated him for it. But one of the reasons they hated him for it, and this is what reveals where the first principles lay in why they hated him. Norway was impoverished at the time, and it had to do with the Napoleonic Wars between Britain and France, and the fact that Norway was under blockade because of its allegiance with France. Hauge, as he was ministering, went to each community and he found out what they were lacking in terms of industry, and he helped start industry all over Norway. Things for which he did not profit himself, but the people in the communities where he established those businesses certainly profited. So there's why the state hated him. It wasn't just that he was preaching the gospel. It's that he was making a difference. And what was the difference? He was proving that individual autonomy and free market capitalism and profiting by virtue of your own ability to cooperate voluntarily and do business and trade outstripped anything the state could do. It was, Hauge himself was living proof that the state's control, economic control, control of the people was oppressive and was causing untold suffering among the Norwegian people. And they couldn't bear the fact that Hauge had the most practical answers to it. He went and started businesses wherever he went, found out what the people needed, whether it was a sawmill, a paper mill, or a grist mill, and he helped the people develop business in their communities, as well as teaching them the gospel. So they hated him on 2 counts. Because the official Church of Norway had failed, which was under Denmark at that time, and their economic policies had failed. So they couldn't bear the fact that he was a living testament to the failure of their own system. So this is what we can expect. Because we have practical solutions that are provably viable on first principles reasoning alone, that free market individual capitalism will always outshine a state-controlled economy with central planning every day of the week, and that under that system it provides more upward mobility than any other system ever devised by man. But of course, it does recognize Matthew 25, where to whom much is given, more will be given. Why? Because 80% of the people, 80% of the work is being done by 20% of the people, and those 20% end up owning 80% of the wealth because of their creativity and their hard work and initiative. These are the principles upon which we have to argue. Why do they want to kill off humanity? Why are their policies so detrimental? Because they're Malthusians. Because they view humanity as a blight on the planet. And what does their father Satan want? Just that. To destroy mankind, created in God's image. These are things to consider and pray about today on this January 25th. We are to know our enemy and know how to reason. And that reasoning has to be based on first principles alone and not get into all the emotional, using the emotional hype and hyperbole, using their language. They're trying to deconstruct the literal meaning of words. Let's use our own words and preach the truth of Christ. God bless you all.